And we continue with Chapter 7, Living Responsibly. We've got an owl in the distance and a lot of black-headed vultures sunning this morning. Thank you for being with me. Weather's beautiful. Clouds are outstanding. All right, Living Responsibly, Chapter 7. Men and women who enjoy high self-esteem have an active orientation to life rather than a passive one. They take full responsibility for the attainment of their desires. They do not wait for others to fulfill their dreams. If there is a problem, they ask, "What can I do about it? What avenues of action are possible to me?" They do not cry, "Someone's got to do something." If something has gone wrong, they ask, "What did I overlook? Where did I miscalculate?" They do not indulge in orgies of blame. In short, they take responsibility for their own existence. And by the principle of reciprocal causation discussed earlier, acts that are causes of good self-esteem are also expressions of good self-esteem. People who take responsibility for their own existence tend thereby to generate healthy self-esteem. To the extent that we shift from a passive to an active orientation, we like ourselves more, trust ourselves more, and feel more competent to live and more deserving of happiness. Working with clients in therapy, I often see that the most radical transformation occurs after the client's realization that no one is coming to the rescue. No one is coming. It's a constant theme of my work on every possible level. When I finally allowed myself to face full responsibility for my life, more than one client has said to me, I began to grow, I began to change, and my self-esteem began to rise. Self-responsibility entails such realizations as the following. All right, I'm going to put this up here because I'm going to figure this is something we should all have in our phones and screenshot. Look at this stuff. I am responsible for my choices and actions. I am responsible for the way I prioritize my time. I am responsible for the level of consciousness I bring to my work. I am responsible for the care or lack of care with which I treat my body. I am responsible for being in the relationships I chose to enter or to remain in. I am responsible for the way I treat other people, my spouse, my children, my parents, my friends, my associates, my boss, my subordinates, the sales clerk in a department store. I am responsible for the meaning I give or fail to give to my own existence. I am responsible for my happiness. I am responsible for my life, materially, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. Okay. When I speak of being responsible in this context, I mean responsible not as the recipient of moral blame or guilt, but responsible as the chief causal agent in your life and behavior. This is an important point. In discussing some of the applications of self-responsibility in the other book, Honoring the Self, I wrote, ... A client in therapy learns to question Why and how do I make myself so passive? Rather than bemoaning, why am I so passive? Instead of asserting that he can't care about anything, the client learns to explore why and how he prevents himself from experiencing strong feelings about anything. Why, in this context, means for what purpose. Instead of saying, why does the back of my neck become painfully tense? The client learns to say, what feelings am I trying to avoid experiencing by tensing my neck muscles? Instead of complaining that people are so often taking advantage of her, the client learns to say, why and how do I invite or encourage people to take advantage of me? Instead of complaining, no one understands me, the client asks, why and how do I make it difficult for people to understand me? Instead of saying, why do women always turn away from me? The client confronts the question, why and how do I cause women to turn away from me? Instead of moaning, I always fail at whatever I attempt, the client begins to understand, why and how do I always cause myself to fail at whatever I attempt? I am far from suggesting that a person never suffers through accident or through the fault of others, or that a person is responsible for everything that may happen to him or her. We are not omnipotent. I do not support the grandiose notion that I am responsible for every aspect of my existence and everything that befalls me. Some things we have control over, others we do not. If I hold myself responsible for matters beyond my control, I will put my self-esteem in jeopardy, since inevitably I will fail my own expectations. If I deny responsibility for matters that are within my control, again, I will jeopardize my self-esteem. I need to know the difference between that which is and is not up to me. I also need to know that I am responsible for my attitude and actions regarding those things I do not have control over, such as the behavior of other people. Self-responsibility, rationally conceived, is indispensable to good self-esteem. Avoiding self-responsibility victimizes us with regard to our own lives. It leaves us helpless. We give power to everyone except ourselves. When we are frustrated, we look for someone to blame. Others are at fault for our unhappiness. By contrast, the appreciation of self-responsibility can be an exhilarating and empowering experience. It places our lives back in our own hands. Sentence completion brings the point home with speed and clarity. Oh, wow. All right. If I were to give up blaming my wife for my unhappiness, said a middle-aged real estate broker, I'd have to confront my own passivity. I'd have to face the fact that I've been sad most of my life. I'd have to recognize that I choose to remain with her when no one forces me to. I'd have to admit that I need someone to blame. I'd be giving up my control over her. I'd have to look at my options. I'd have to do something other than just suffer. In the next, if I were to accept that I am responsible for the condition of my body, said a young woman who ate and drank too much, I'd have to give up feeling sorry for myself I'd have to stop blaming my parents for everything. I'd probably have to start exercising. I don't think I could go on abusing my body as I do now. I'd like myself more. I'd get in shape. I'd stop wallowing in self-pity. I'd get off my butt and do something about it. And the next. If I took responsibility for my feelings, said a wife and mother whose emotional eruptions were a nonstop storm through the lives of her family, I'd have to look at the fact that when I'm frustrated, I become like a child. I'd have to face up to what I'm really unhappy about. I'd know that a lot of my anger is a cover-up for insecurity. Maybe I could be more honest with my husband about my fears. I would not torment my kids. I have to admit that often I use emotions to manipulate my family into doing what I want. I'd have to accept that other people have feelings. I'd think before I spoke. I wouldn't see myself as a victim of the universe. And the next. If I took responsibility for getting what I want, said a man in his 30s who had never held a job for longer than 8 months, I'd have to recognize that time is going by. I'd face that I'm not getting any younger. I wouldn't daydream and fantasize so much. I'd have to admit that all I've ever done is spin my wheels. I'd have to admit how scared I am of really committing myself to anything. I wouldn't envy other people's success so much. I couldn't keep blaming the system. I'd settle into one direction and stay with it. I'd stop coming up with alibis. I would recognize that nothing is going to get better unless I change. And the next. So long as I can blame my parents for my unhappiness, said a 34-year-old school teacher who switched therapists several times a year. I never have to grow up. I can get people to feel sorry for me. I can make my folks feel guilty. I can make other people feel they've got to make it up to me. I can tell myself it's not my fault. I can defeat my therapists. I can feel tragic. I can be a victim. I have an excuse for everything. I don't have to take charge of my life. And the next. If I were to take full responsibility for my own life, said a psychiatrist who was responsive to everyone's needs except his own or his family's, I'd stop telling myself I'm too busy to be happy. I'd stop trying to impress my patients with how kind and compassionate I am. I'd stop feeling like a martyr. I'd stop insisting that my wife has to make unlimited allowances for me. I'd know where my responsibility to others stops. I'd be kinder to myself and kinder to my wife and kids. I'd recognize that self-sacrifice is a cop-out. I'd start applying to myself what I teach my patients. I'd admit that no one can live for others and shouldn't if they could. I'd live with more integrity. I'd respect myself more, and so would my family. I'd have to think about what I really want in life. If you have not yet done the sentence completion exercises in this book, you may be astonished at the candor with which people acknowledge the payoffs of avoiding responsibility. But if you truly want to raise your self-esteem, here are some sentence stems to work with before proceeding further. Alright, friends, here we go again. Oh, where is it? Come on. Oh. Okay. Sometimes when things aren't going well, I make myself helpless by The good thing about making myself helpless is sometimes I try to avoid responsibility by blaming. Sometimes I keep myself passive by. Sometimes I use self-blame to. If I took more responsibility when working, if I took more responsibility for the success of my relationships, if I took responsibility for every word I utter, if I took responsibility for my feelings, if I took responsibility for my actions, moment by moment. Okay, here we go. If I took responsibility for my happiness, if the only meaning in my life is the meaning I am willing to create, if I were willing to breathe deeply and fully experience my own power, if I were willing to see what I see and know what I know. Right now, it is very clear that let's get you back. I swear, these birds are letting me read to them. I guess they're usually fighting and stuff, but okay. Perhaps you are aware that in some areas of your life, you are less self-responsible than in others. You may be very active and responsible at work and very passive at home with your family. You may be very responsible about your health and very irresponsible about money. You may be active about your intellectual development and passive about your emotions. Here's another list, friends. Okay, let's stop. Here we go. Consider the following areas: your health, your emotions, your choice of lovers, your choice of spouse, your choice of friends, your financial well-being, the level of consciousness and responsibility you bring to your work, the level of consciousness and responsibility you bring to your relationships, your way of treating people in general, your intellectual development, your character, your happiness, your self-esteem. Now imagine a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 signifying what you would regard as an optimal self-responsibility, and a 1 signifying the lowest conceivable level of self-responsibility. Rate yourself on each item by putting a number beside it. You can isolate the areas most in need of work. At this point, if you think about one or another of the areas where you are not very responsible, you may find yourself protesting. But I don't know what to do. I don't know how to be more responsible. Of course, this is rarely true. In my early practice, when clients would raise this objection, I would actually show and tell them what they could do to become more active participants in their own lives. Experience has taught me the fallacy of this approach. Today, after clients know how to do sentence completion, I usually give them the stem. One of the ways I can take more responsibility with regard to, and then fill in the area, is to, and then I tell them to proceed full speed ahead. Then they begin to appreciate how knowledgeable they really are. I have heard many people from all backgrounds and walks of life produce stunningly insightful endings for this stem, and I have learned to listen with benevolent skepticism to protestations of ignorance and helplessness. Of course, sometimes other people can help us to become more aware of some action possibilities. But there are always some things we already know we can do. Begin with these. To accept responsibility for one's existence is to recognize the need to live productively. This is a basic and profoundly important application of the idea of having an active orientation to life. It is not the degree of our productive ability that is at issue here, but rather our choice to exercise whatever ability we do possess. Productive work is the supremely human act. Animals must adjust themselves to their physical environment. Human beings adjust the physical environment to themselves. We have the capacity to give psychological and existential unity to our lives by integrating our actions with goals projected across our lifetimes. It is not the kind of work we select that affects our self-esteem, provided, of course, that the work is not inimical to human life. INIMICAL. It's not the kind of work we select that affects our self-esteem, but whether we seek work that requires and expresses the fullest, most conscientious use of our minds and values, assuming that the opportunity to do so exists. I feel like I have an audience here. They keep inching down closer to me. Okay. To live productively is to provide ourselves with one of the unique joys and rewards of being human. Living responsibly and thereby fostering healthy self-esteem is intimately associated with living actively. It is through actions that an attitude of self-responsibility is implemented and expressed. What actions can I take that will bring me closer to my goals? What actions can I take to advance my career, to improve my love life, to elicit better treatment from others, to raise my income, to make myself happier, to cultivate my intellectual or spiritual development? Just as if we wish to raise our self-esteem, we need to think in terms of behaviors. If we wish to live more responsibly, we need to think in very specific action terms. For example, it is not good enough to tell yourself, I should be more conscientious. What will you do if you are more conscientious? It is not good enough to say, I should have a better attitude with my family. How will a better attitude be manifested in specific behavior? All right, we have a page left, and we will have completed chapter 7. Squeezed it all in one video. Again, with the vultures picking through my rocks here. Behavior can be mental or physical. Thinking is an action. Holding your focus on the task to be done is an action. Making a list is an action. Making a statement to another person is an action. And so is caressing a face, conveying appreciation in words, writing a letter, acknowledging a mistake, preparing a report, balancing a checkbook, or applying for a job. The question is always, is the behavior appropriate to the context? To be self-responsible is to be concerned with that question. Therefore, if we want to practice greater self-responsibility in some aspect of our lives, we need to consider what actions are possible to me here. What are my options? If I'm not waiting for a miracle or for someone else to do something, then what can I do? If I choose to do nothing, to accept the status quo, am I willing to take responsibility for that decision? Observe this. If there are areas of your life in which you practice a higher level of self-responsibility than you do in others, my guess is that those are also the areas in which you like yourself most. The areas in which you most most avoid responsibility are the areas in which you like yourself least. Once again, I recommend sentence completion to check this out. Thus, here are the sentences. I practice greatest self-responsibility when I... There we go. Just gonna put it up there. Come on, baby, come on. Where is it? Where is it? There we go. Oh, I zoomed in. That's what happened. There we go. I practice greatest self-responsibility when I most avoid self-responsibility when I am self-responsible, I feel. When I avoid self-responsibility, I feel. If any of what I'm writing is true, I am becoming aware. Let's get back here to my friends. Whatever's in those rocks must be good, because they're just going after it. Okay, just a few words left. Once again, think about the next 7 days of your life. If you were to practice greater self-responsibility, what might you do differently? Write your answers in a notebook. Then, consider translating what you have written into action. Don't think of committing yourself for a lifetime, just for the next 7 days. As an experiment, discover the impact on your sense of self. Discover the impact on your life. Then, if you like what you discover, try 7 more days, then 7 more. All right. We're all the way up to page 120. We start with 121. I've been reading to you from Nathaniel Branden's book, How to Raise Your Self-Esteem. This book was made in somewhere around 1988. He likes to use a lot of words from last century. So I appreciate you being with me. Let's see what the name of this one was. That was kind of a short one, so I was able to fit it all on here. Living Responsibly. That was chapter 7. All right, so chapter 8 will be Living Authentically, and we are almost done with this whole book. Thank you for letting me share my books with you. I appreciate you.